Hey everyone, Natalie here, and this video today we're going to be looking at defining centralized review through nomenclature and models. So let's get started. The history of external review has led to a variety of structures with no single model and no single accepted terminology. People talking about an external IRB may be referring to very different relationships. Saying central IRB creates different pictures for people depending on their background and viewpoint. The meaning is very dependent on one's position in the research world. For example, IRB administrators at an active hospital might deal with their institutional IRB, several independent IRBs, the National Cancer Institute's Central Institutional Review Board, and perhaps other collaborative IRBs. Each of these IRBs will have their own expectations, forms, and agreements that may come to the IRB administrator directly through the investigator or legal department, or perhaps not at all. On the other hand, local IRB administrators will likely be unaware of the impacts its own agreements and procedures have on the administration of external review boards. That being said, in today's video, we're going to be looking at three aspects of IRBs. The first is nomenclature. The second is cooperative institutional models. And the third is central IRB review models. So let's get started. Nomenclature. Now, there are a number of concepts that overlap and terms that have not been adequately defined. During the Public Responsibility in Medicine Research Conference in 1998, there seemed to be some confusion about what a central review board was and where it could operate. The National Conference on Alternative IRB Models in 2006 attempted to develop some models of relationships. Now, there's still no clear standardized nomenclature, and the language used often mixes functions and relationships. But with that being said, without really any true accepted systematic definitions describing IRBs and their relationships, here are some basic terms to describe external IRBs. So the first is the central IRB. Now this central IRB is a single board that reviews research studies for multiple sites. A central IRB can be any registered IRB that functions to create multiple sites, but most commonly the term central IRB references an independent IRB. Now the second is the single IRB record. This term was adopted by the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative. Their website states a central IRB is a single IRB of record for a given protocol. The central IRB assumes all the usual IRB responsibilities, including all reviews of all relevant documents. A single IRB of record oversees the same research protocol across a number of locations. Next is centralized IRB review. Now this centralized IRB is a function performed by the central IRB. Regardless of the group providing it, centralized IRB review is one review for a number of sites. Commonly, the sponsor determines which sites are to participate and suggests or requires those sites to use central IRB selected to perform the centralized review. And lastly, the cooperative review. This reflects a group of equal and/or related institutions agreeing upon the use of one IRB to provide a review for the group creating a new IRB for common use. The agreements reached may cover one study or grant, multiple studies, or all studies within a group. The IRB of record may always be the cooperative central IRB, may be an IRB at any of the member sites, or may be dependent on where the primary or lead investigator works. All right, so with that being said, let's move to our next point, which is cooperative interinstitutional models. Now, any institution may create a written agreement to use another institution's IRB for some or all reviews. An entity or group of institutions can organize an IRB to review all or a subset of studies. These are closed systems available to only named institution. Now there's a couple of instances that I wanted to review. So the first is reciprocal agreements. This means two institutions may have an agreement such as that each IRB will accept review of another IRB. The second is resilience agreements. This is an institution who may offer services of its IRB to other institutions or community groups. Next is IRB Consortia. Several instances exist of multiple organizations that share common attributes and studies, cooperating, forming an IRB available to consortium members. An example is the Biomedical Research Alliance of New York or Multi-Academic Clinical Research Organization. Lastly, the system-wide IRB means that healthcare systems, hospital systems, and universities have started IRBs within each institution, but they found a central IRB much more efficient, less expensive, and provided a greater consistency across systems. So an example of this is Partners Healthcare, formed in 1996. Okay, now we're on to our next point, which is central IRB review models. So centralized IRB reviews provide an alternative for the duplicative local reviews and can cut time to start up a new study pretty quickly. Some organizations provide central IRB review for specific groups or around specific disciplines needed. So first, let's look at NCI CURB. The NCI CURB started in 1999 as an oncology-orientated IRB that institutions were invited to use with the understanding that each local IRB would perform a facilitated review to evaluate the local conditions. Facilitated review was dropped in 2013, and institutions using the NCI CURB now agree not to duplicate IRB review. This requirement became more acceptable with the expectation that each institution could have a human research protected program within where there might be a component that could be evaluated via local conditions and decide really whether the study should be approved or not. All right, so the next step is the federally mandated group IRB. More recently, the National Institutes of Health has created with research organizations to coordinate and run their large studies. These contracts have gone both to contract research organizations and to create a structure to provide centralized IRB reviews for all investigators taking part in its trial. Lastly, the independent IRB. Now this is the oldest model of centralized review, where sponsors and contracts and independent organizations select and submit studies. Once the independent IRB has been approved for the study, individual investigators selected by the sponsor are then reviewed to determine if they have the qualifications needed to conduct the study at their own sites. And that's about it. For more information on IRBs, please continue on to the next section in Module 2. Thanks!